Hi, everybody. We can't see you. Just to be clear, we can't see anybody, but we're here, and we're here today to talk about the Ottawa International Animation Festival, and specifically Pitch This, the event that happens once a year, that involves a whole bunch of like original projects that are presented to a live audience after months of dedicated mentorship. And we're lucky enough today to have two previous winners of the event and the formidable force behind the event, who are going to talk to us today about their experience and also, what's coming next for Ottawa. So how about we start by everyone introducing themselves. Let's start with you, Mansa. If you can give us a little bit of an intro to who you are and what brought you here today.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Mansa Chintoh, and I am a producer on Project Blackout, which was the winning Pitch This presentation this year. And I'm also an entertainment lawyer by day. I work in-house at Entertainment One, and I've been working with Malachi for the past 2 years developing this project, which he had been developing for a number of years before that. And now I'll turn it over to him to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Malachi Ellis. I am the creator and creative producer behind Project Blackout. My background comes in both live action and in animation. I started more so on the production side of a lot of things, producing a lot of independent content, then started production coordinating at an animation company. And then one day Nancy had reached out to me being like, hey, do you have any ideas of a series that you want to get off the ground? I told him the idea of Project Blackout, and we went on this crazy 2-year journey that ended us at Ottawa and pitching in this phenomenal festival.
Yay! And how about you, Sarah?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Lamoureux. I'm the development manager for the Ottawa International Animation Festival. So I help organize Pitch This and TAC with the Mercury Filmworks team and some other partners as well.
Yay! And a real force of nature you are. Like your enthusiasm before and during the event, like goes a long way to make sure these things come together. So it's awesome to have you here. And I'm Heath from Mercury Filmworks. I'm the Chief Content Officer here at Mercury Filmworks. We do a lot of beloved series for Disney, Netflix, and companies all over the world. But also we develop our own originals. And one of the things that we've been really passionate about is trying to support local creators. And that's why for us it was an obvious thing to get involved with sponsoring the Pitch This event, especially when we understood how in depth it was. I had a previous experience with an event in South America which had a mentorship program, but coming to Ottawa and seeing how in depth and how much support was provided for creators, we really felt passionate about getting behind it. And so today, I think that's what we're going to really start by focusing on is Malachi and Mansa's experience. First of all, what did you feel like going into this program? At the very, very beginning, were you nervous? Were you excited? Were you like, oh my God, we just won something? Or was it like, okay, we're going to kill the climb here? How did you feel? Was it daunting? Was it exciting? What was your first kind of feeling going into it?
At the beginning of the process, we were super excited to have been selected because we heard that there were, I think, more than 2,000 submissions or something like that. So to even have been selected for that process, we were really excited. And then seeing, I think, the quality and the resume of all the mentors, we were even more excited. Regardless of who we ended up with, we knew it was going to be a great opportunity to get some really great feedback, some really important kind of market information. We were just ready to hit the ground running.
Yeah, I think it was even better, especially to kind of be mentored by individuals who are very much actively working still in the industry. Right. It gave us a net feedback of kind of what was happening now at that time, being this is how your series could fit in the landscape now as well too. Here's how you should navigate pitching it. All of our mentors and the people that have contributed to helping us pitch the series are expert pitchers. Honestly, the people that gave us advice were phenomenal. Just they could take even just a simple log line and tell you how to make a whole entire 10-minute pitch just perfect, the most compelling thing ever, even if they were trying to sell you bread, to be completely honest.
Sell me this pen.
Yeah, exactly. They tell you all the tips, all the trades as well too. And it really helps, I think, for myself, really get to kind of crack that story that I always wanted to tell as well too. For me, I always have ideas in my head, and I struggle really, especially communicating them sometimes. Mansa does a really great job of helping me to communicate it a little bit better. But the way our mentors came in and took the words that I wanted to say or the ideas that I wanted to explore and helped me expand them even more to make sure that they were as concise as possible, as clear as possible, was great. I think it's something that you can't get. Mentorship like that, you can't get anywhere else. I mean, you have to pay someone to get that kind of experience, honestly.
That's pretty cool, and it's great. It's great to hear that it's so valuable. So if I was to ask you, what was the one thing you wish you knew going into this? Like, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Mansa, do you want to start or shall I?
No, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I was letting this a little before. The first thing I would have loved to know is that the final pitch was going to be in front of 200 people in a massive auditorium, because we did it in 2 phases. In the first phase, it was a smaller room, and then after we got selected to be a finalist, it was in a much larger room with many more people, and we had mics and a stage, and I was not expecting any of that. So that would have been nice. But I think one of the things that I also wish I had known going in as well too is just how much experience and how much networking was the opportunity there at the festival as well too. Going into it, we were really kind of preparing okay, we've got to pitch it like this. This is how we're going to do it. We're preparing just for the pitch. And then when we got there, we realized how much opportunity there was to meet other people, expose ourselves to this industry as well too, because everyone was really there, which was really great. To get a lot of insight from individuals was really wonderful.
But I do think it was really helpful that we had spent so much time honing the pitch, because by the time we arrived at the festival, we were pitching everybody.
Hey, you're on fire. I'll pitch you. I'll pitch you. I'll pitch you. Want to pitch? Get over here. That's so cool. And so what about okay, this one's for you, Mansa. What about the mentorship process? What advice would you give to someone to get the most out of a mentorship opportunity? If you're a mentee about to be mentored, are there things you can prepare or the things you should consider about how to get the most out of the experience?
Yeah, I think for us, because we had a form of our pitch already kind of outlined, we had some things that we'd been pitching already in the market. Mm-hmm. And so we had something formal to provide our mentor so they could give us kind of real notes. It wasn't like we were creating the pitch at the same time as going through the mentorship. It's like they were able to really target specific areas and say, this needs more detail, or, focus on this element of the story, or a bit less of this. And so I think having that preparation done up front really allowed us to make the most use of our time, because, I think we only had, it was maybe 3 or 4 sessions with our mentor. And so being able to go into that first session already sharing with them our materials, having a list of questions that we had sent them in advance that we wanted answers to, it just facilitated that process being much more, I think, efficient for everybody.
Yeah. Essentially, in our very first call, what we did is we literally sent our mentor essentially a list of questions, like Mansa said, but then our whole package, we had some artwork already done up. We sent them that. We have text of the document of kind of where the story was and how we're going to do it. And they took that and tore it all apart, which was great. And then gave us a lot of notes, asked us so many questions, and allowed us for our second session to just come in and just pitch it how we had normally done it, just based off of the questions he had asked, really not giving us specific feedback yet on the pitch until we got that forced opportunity of it, because it's always great to get feedback from someone who's just a blind perspective as well too, to get that kind of insight. So that was really helpful. Being as prepared as possible as Mansa made sure that I was really great, because that made sure that we were getting the most that we could out of the mentorship opportunity.
So that's cool. So be prepared and lean in, right? So lean into the process. That's so cool. And so speaking of pitching, so how about the difference between in-person and virtual? You touched on it at the beginning. I wish I'd known there was going to be 200 people in that room. I mean, we were pretty surprised about how popular the turnout was, and I think that really goes to show also the quality of the pitches, like yourselves, that everyone was, I think word spread pretty quick that this was a pretty special year in terms of the quality of presentations. So what was your experience in terms of like pitching online, obviously through the mentorship and doing lots of online pitching, and then all of a sudden going into in-person?
I mean,
In person for me, it was just overcoming the nerves. In a situation when you're virtual, you're at home, you can hide a little bit behind your screen. And so, yeah, you just really have to overcome that mental hurdle of like, oh, these are all the people watching me. I can see their faces. That one's not smiling. Why is he not smiling?
Yeah, I myself have a lot of nervous tics, I find as well too. Like when I'm nervous, I do a lot of different things. I move around too much. I walk around too much. I talk very, very, very fast when I'm nervous as well too.
You too.
Yeah, so it took a lot of practice as well too, whether it was like me and Mansa being in a room, just talking to each other, pitching back and forth to each other. Me grabbing my partner and being like, "I'm just gonna sit. You're just gonna sit down and you're gonna listen to me talk to this," because it's different than me looking at a computer where I can like forget that it's a person there. I can just think that it's a computer. Sometimes even during online pitches, I'll literally put a document covering everyone's faces with my notes instead. But you can't do that in real life. So you have to be able to really get used to kind of looking at a person and meeting them in the eye and saying, okay, this is the story I have to tell. This is what I'm telling you, which was great to get the practice of just being like in person, even if it's just a one-on-one. You can use that same technique in a room of 100 people. All you have to do is find your one person and act as if you're talking to that one person.
That's great advice.
I would say as well, again, preparation, because for us, we didn't have to rely on our notes because we had practiced it so often. And I think that made it a lot easier, even though we were nervous in the room, but we knew the pitch kind of inside out. So even if there were moments where we started to feel a bit overwhelmed, it's like we have all the words and we didn't have to rely on notes.
Yeah, we also had keywords that we were using as well too, where Mansa would say a specific keyword that would remind me to be like, okay, I need to talk about this one thing.
Oh, that's right, that thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting, like setting sort of milestones through your presentation, so you know that word leads to that word. That's cool. What great advice. And yeah, I think that the preparation, what an important part of it. So you also just touched on some of the advantages of pitching virtually versus pitching in person as well. You talked about like, sticking your notes up in front of you so you can be reading notes but also pitching. Obviously you can't do that when you're on stage, right? Because it looks a bit weird if you have notes stuck on your forehead. But what other advantages did you find from pitching online versus pitching in person, or vice versa?
I think one of the advantages as well too was being able to share a lot of the resources that we had. For example, like we had a lot of amazing artwork done by a designer of ours. So sharing virtually gives you a lot of opportunity to like showcase it to its full quality. People can like zoom in as much as they want. They can take a screenshot if they feel and like save it for later, being like, hey, I saw this really great pitch and I want to show you the artwork that people had in this pitch as well too. Or what kind of like what the feel of the show as well too could be really meant to seen more, especially through a virtual lens. I think another benefit virtually as well too is being able to see the timer as well too. I saw someone's comments about that. You can just see the time exactly what you're kind of running on. So it was great to kind of like set markers, being like, okay, at the 2-minute mark, I have to be done talking about this mark. At this point, that's when we have to start wrapping up and asking for questions. So time in a virtual setting is much more easier to tell unless you're in than as opposed to being in a room with a person.
So true.
Yeah, I would just say the advantage of being in person is being able to just read the room, like when you're virtually meeting, everyone, while they try to hide it well, people are sometimes emailing off to the side, it's easier to command people's attention in person because you're in the room watching what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yes, so true. So true.
Reading people is the best thing about in person because you can really get a sense of whether your pitch is going well or whether you should stop talking about what you're currently talking about. There's many times where me and Mansa have been like pitching in person as well too, and we'll be like going on a tangent, and then I'll look at the person in their eyes, and I can tell they do not want to hear this anymore. We cut it short, or we figure out a way to
reading the room. I've been in those pitches myself where it's like, oh, I need to end this now. This is not going well. The worst one is like when someone's listening and they just keep doing this, and then you see a cell phone pop up. You're like, oh my god, you're texting. So what other disadvantages then to pitching? Like obviously technology is a bit of a struggle. Sometimes sound doesn't work, microphone doesn't work. There's the internet connections. But are there any obvious disadvantages to virtual versus in person?
Ooh.
Yeah, I would say the big disadvantage is the same as the in-person advantage, is that you can't really tell how much you're connecting.
Right. Yeah. Totally. That makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. That's really the biggest thing, like in a virtual setting. I mean, also the one thing about kind of being virtual sometimes is that you're not necessarily in control of your surroundings as well too. Or sometimes in a physical setting, you're not necessarily in control of it either. Maybe you're being called to a certain room or a certain boardroom that you have no idea whether there's going to be a computer there for you to hook up to be able to set up your presentation, or you don't know if you're actually going to be meeting one person or you're meeting like 5 people. Sometimes it's
or 200.
Exactly, right? On a virtual thing, at least sometimes you can see like, oh, I can see the Zoom like count participants, or I can see how many people are on the calendar event. Whereas you show up to a room and they're like, oh, you thought you were just going to meet the development exec? Oh, you're actually meeting them and the president and their like wife as well too, like everyone in the room.
That's clear. And so I think the other thing that I've noticed with you two as well is that you have a really interesting dynamic as well. And I think that is part of, I think, what makes your project really unique, and your presentation, the way you go about it as well, is that you have creative producer support going on there as well, where you can actually support each other on different aspects of the project's development and its growth and presentation. So can you talk to us a little bit about that as well? Because it's not always the case. Like sometimes it's like a producer a creator just on their own without any of that support. And I think that's quite a unique thing that may be worth talking about.
I mean, I think that we realized really early on that we worked really well together. And I think that is just born naturally out of how we work together. As Malachi touched on earlier, he had an earlier iteration of this pitch. And when I came on board, I helped him to articulate some ideas that I understood from reading his pitch, but weren't really clear on the page. And so that process of us working together through that development of like, okay, I know this is what we're saying here, but it's not reading this way. This is how I can add my value by, tweaking that language. And so we just had this really natural back and forth rhythm. And so it seemed like the best way to pitch, to just kind of pitch the way that we work together. And so that's how we evolved into that style.
Yeah, I think
interesting.
One of the first things that came to when we were going about this project is originally I was just pitching it myself, and I had a whole vision of how I wanted to do it. An opportunity came up where Mansa was going to go to France as well too to pitch the series, but then we realized it doesn't actually make sense for Mansa alone to be pitching it. It makes more sense for the creative also to come along and support that and be kind of like behind that as well too. There's some projects that a producer can pitch it alone. You don't need the creative there, but for this specific story and for this specific content, it made more sense for the both of us to kind of be there as well too. And I hate talking so much that I had to get Mansa to talk a little bit for me, because some things I say just don't make sense. And if you let me go on, I will go on and more understand what's going on.
I won't know when to stop. Well, that's interesting. So was that like a non-negotiable? Was that something you were like, okay, I need to be there for all the pitches? Were there any things where you're like, okay, this could be great, but I want to make sure I'm always there for this, or I want to be doing this, or like did you have to sort of like come up with some kind of like pact agreement between the two of you?
Well, I mean, we do actually have an option agreement as between me and Malachi for this project, and it does specify that he wanted to be involved in everything, but also that's just how I work. It's he's the creative, this is his idea. It would feel really unnatural for me to just kind of take it without him, especially because it is a personal story to him. So while we do have an agreement that says that he wants to be involved in conversations and pitches, it just felt like a natural fit for him to be included in the room for everything anyway.
So that sounds like there's a great level of trust there as well. Is that something you felt immediately, or is that something you built over time?
Honestly, I think it was kind of pretty immediate, and that was part of the reason why I chose to work with him. So when I was looking for ideas to option at the time, I was meeting with a bunch of different creators, and I really was just looking for something that resonated with me, a story that felt like really like timely and like needed to be told right now. And there were a few creators who I met who had great stories, but the thing that I kept coming back to was that Malachi and I really had just like an instant connection. We really got along really well immediately. And so I just went with my gut and I was like, hey, this feels really good and it feels right. So if we're going to be living with this project for however many years in development, I want it to be with someone who I feel that instant connection, trust, chemistry with.
Yeah, a producer friend of mine has talked about a lot of their relationship between producing a director, producing a writers, and they've talked about it as it's a marriage. And so honestly, sometimes it feels like me and Mansa are married to this Project Blackout. And to be in a marriage, it takes trust as well too. To understand how in which it's going, constant communication as well too. Like that's how I view kind of like being on creative projects with partnerships as well too. So I think if I didn't feel that kind of like trust either with Mansa or that kind of an immediate connection when we came to each other, like our very first call was literally just us talking about being absolute nerds in high school and stuff. And so that's how we knew that we were going to be connected together for this, and knew that like, okay, we have this already shared bond, so it makes sense to kind of collaborate in that same kind of way as you would with a friend, almost in a sense.
Well, yeah, and I think personally, I think it really shows through when you're up speaking together and presenting the project. Like I think it's a genuine value add. It really shows through that there's a real relationship there. You didn't just meet yesterday and you're pitching a show. Like there's a real relationship there.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. So what about like in the spirit of this marriage metaphor, how would you advise someone to go out and meet somebody? If they're looking to create this kind of relationship, like what how do you go about meeting a producer, or how does a producer go about meeting a new creative talent that they haven't met before or don't know, or do you have any advice for how to go about that?
Well, for me, what I did was I reached out to my networks. When I was looking for projects, I reached out to my networks of people that I trusted, whose values and opinions that I respect. Mm-hmm. And then I said, do you know of any creatives? And then through kind of word of mouth, that's how I was kind of initially meeting people. But then within the industry, you start to see there's a number of events, different markets, different networking things, and you start to see the same kind of faces through and through. And so just kind of who was I connecting with at those places? Who was I seeing a lot and was I intrigued about and wanting to know more about? And so I would say for creators or producers who are trying to find projects, go to everything, go to all the different industry talks and panels and artist events, and just talk to people.
Yeah, on that same note, like the reason on that same note, the reason I feel like Mansa and I were even able to connect is I was just making myself known to everyone and anyone that was in the industry as much as possible. The friend that connected us was working in distribution, and we met through like a networking event. And I always make myself known as much as possible. Greet people with kindness as well too. Try to make myself as memorable as possible as well, so that way they can go off and being like, oh yeah, I met Malachi and he was really cool. You should talk to him as well. And then that's how Mansa and I got connected.
Okay, so I have to ask, how does one make themselves memorable?
For me, I just I have a very known brand, and it's very much around the reason the show is surrounded by superheroes is because a lot of my identity has to do with superheroes. You can kind of see that like there's a very much nerd wall just hanging in the background for me. So I always make myself known, but I think I'm known for being very authentically myself as well too. And that's the best kind of people you want to be connected with, is people who are just truly them. So that I would say is the most memorable quality. When you can see someone, you're talking to someone, and I feel like people shine the brightest when they're just being truly who they are and can be as comfortable as they are in their own skin. So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I can hear the invisible applause. Everyone is yelling right now. Even though we can't see anybody, they're all like, woo!
I heard an invisible eye roll, but I'm glad you heard applause.
No, I heard applause. I heard tears. People are sobbing in the corridors right now. It's like it was like really like so spot on. Like you really summed it up so well. I find that really inspirational. It's so true, because I think that people get really confused about they have to have a shtick or they have to do this or whatever, but there's nothing better than just being yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
So that's cool. I mean, that's really, really like so much great advice coming through here now. So I think that the next thing I wanted to talk about as well is are you planning to do any other projects together? Like when you got something working this well, when you're really jamming so well, do you have other things in the works? Have you got plans to do other things?
We don't have anything planned at the moment, but I will say right now that I absolutely will.
Same. I've got a few things cooking. It's because for me, this Project Block is very special because there's very few projects I come on to from a creative standpoint. Normally, I'm honestly in the Mansa position. I'm normally producing. I'm normally very like line budgets, financials, those kind of aspects. But there's some things cooking in my brain every once in a while as well too. But Mansa's always kind of my go-to because I know I have a relationship with them as a producer rather than as me as a creative. So I feel very much more comfortable sharing creative ideas with Mansa as opposed to anyone else. So Mansa's basically got like a what's one of those
I got a first look.
Yeah, you got a first look deal.
First look deal by default. That's great. Well, I think that we sometimes there's a lot of like barriers that we set up for ourselves. Like, we need this contract, we need that contract, we need an agent, we need all that. But in fact, like I think some of these things can happen naturally just by building actually like real relationships with people. And back to your point about being oneself. I think if you like honestly putting yourself out there, then you're honestly meeting people that you can work with and create relationships with. So that's pretty cool, and I think it's reassuring to know that still exists in our industry.
Yeah, I've been surprised about some of the advice that I heard when I was going through school. A lot of times people would tell me like, oh, just like go out and shoot something, or like message this person and like just do a cold email or whatever. And I was like, when I got out of school, I thought to myself, do people actually do that? Do people just go out and make things, or do people actually like cold email folks? And then I started doing that and realized like, oh, this actually works. Like there are actually people who would get back to me and be like, yeah, let's grab coffee, or let's hang out, or let's talk about this. There's a lot of kind people in the world. Let's just say that.
Totally agree. Especially in the animation industry, I think we're lucky. It's like I've had briefly dabbled in live action. It's still not quite the same. So I think animation we're really lucky with that for sure.
Yeah, especially also being in such a virtual landscape that we've transitioned to. So many more people are much more willing to just jump on a Zoom call for like 15 minutes of their day or whatever. I know there was one company I was talking to where they've actually they have a scheduled block in their calendar where they're just taking coffee chats with like emerging creatives, and they just do that always. So if someone reaches out to them, they'll be like, oh yeah, you can schedule a time during this block during this day, and we can just chat.
It's like, yeah, there's so many examples in the industry where that's really paid for both parties as well. Like I think that's super smart, finding that time, and I think in a world where we're also time poor, I think that's really valuable. So I think that that brings me to my next question for you as well is, when someone's preparing a pitch deck, right? So you've met your ideal partner, you're like, okay, we can work together, we're going to do this, and we're going to start preparing a pitch deck. What advice would you give about getting that process started, and what elements would you need to include in that?
Oof.
Getting started. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, for our story, one of the things that's very important when it comes to sci-fi or anything kind of like in the genre space is world building and rules. So a lot of the times, anytime we do a pitch, or anytime Mansa was like, when I first pitched that idea to Mansa, the first couple of questions were like, okay, how does this world work? Like, where are these people getting their powers from? What's causing this? Who are the villains? Like, just the whole world building was very much essential as well too for the kind of genre. But I think outside of that, and even before you even get there, is characters are everything, and characters are key, because at the end of the day, we're watching a show for the people to see ourselves in those people. So if they're not people that fully fleshed individuals, then there is no show. So starting at the core of like, who are these lead characters? how do they react within each other, or how do they react as individuals as well too. Building our core team was basically the most essential part of developing Project Blackout. Our 3 lead characters were basically what it always came down to in the end. Everything circles around them. Even coming back to the world itself, as we wanted to make sure the world was being reflected through their eyes and what they were experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think character is really essential. And as Malachi said, it's really having understanding of who those characters are and making sure in our pitch, because we wanted to also include, a season 1 story arc. Like we often, when you're pitching, to broadcasters or streamers, they like to have a sense of that, where the story is going to go. Right. And it's not just kind of like a quick idea. So in that arc, we really had to think about, okay, are these just events that are happening that our characters are traveling through, or is it the characters that are pushing the story forward? And so that was something that we really honed in on through this pitch. This process was our mentor really helped us to think about that and to, okay, how are these characters pushing the story forward and to where we see the ultimate conclusion for the following season. And then probably we'd want to have a little bit of a tease as to what the subsequent seasons could be. So the key things I would think about are, characters, the world, the pilot, what we expect that to be, the season 1 arc, and is that it?
Why now? That's the biggest other thing.
Oh,
yes, why now? Why now? Why now? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, for us, it was the intimate connection that we each had to the story. So, I mean, Malachi created this story based on characters that are personal to him. But then as we developed the story, I started to, see myself a lot in one of our characters. And so it was really easy for me to have that personal connection, because by the end of it, it's like, well, then she is me.
That's it. Yeah, that's interesting. How so in order to make, because one of the things I think is the biggest challenge of developing a show and presenting it so early is the character's not quite lived in yet. Like you're trying to figure them out. And like there's exercises you can do with, like, going through like the character's wants, needs, gets, how, those kinds of things for like writing exercises. But like trying to make a character feel like they've chosen their own clothes and they've made choices in the morning when they got out of bed and all that kind of stuff, and like making them feel lived in. Are there any like kind of questions you can ask yourself, or things that a process that you went through in terms of trying to like get these characters to feel authentic?
Yeah, Phil had a really great metaphor that he used for us, our mentor, that helped us to really hone our characters, their relationship with each other and who they are. And it was simply just being like, okay, what would your character do if they were locked in an elevator? Like, simple as that. Basically, like, what would they do if they were alone in the elevator? What would they do if it was 2 of them in the elevator? What would they do if it was all 3 of them in the elevator? How would they react? What would the scenario be like? And you can just by that simple kind of like scenario, it made me realize that, like, oh, they're just going on their innate instincts, or they're like overthinking it, or there's different ways in which anyone can react to the scenarios. It's almost like going through therapy with your own character in a sense, realizing how they actually work.
That's a really good analogy, because there were so many times that, like, I actually Googled like different like therapeutic or like terms when I was trying to classify our characters. And I was like, okay, so this is her upbringing and this is where she is now. And I was like, what kind of attachment is that?
That's so funny. Yeah. It's,
how does someone with this kind of attachment behave?
With this person over here, let's do a disc review of their personality types. And yeah, okay, I get it. Totally. Yep. It's hilarious, but I think that's I can't remember the writer once said that when he was writing his stories, and someone interviewed him and asked him, like, how do you do it? He said, I just put my characters in a room and follow them around.
Yeah.
It sounds like the same kind of exercise, right? But it is a thing I think that people struggle with the most is like how do I make these characters feel lived in, authentic, and real? So it's so early on. In the project's process. So the next question in terms of like things you have to have in that first pitch Bible, you touched on character, world building, rules of the world, sort of series arcs. how far did you get into like the writing process in terms of writing a pilot script, or did you feel legitimate in doing that? Did you feel like you needed to hire a writer to help you with that? Like, how did you find that process?
I mean, we're in that process now. So we have a pilot, we have drafts of it, but it needs some more tweaking. We've got a story editor on board to help us to kind of like really hone the story. I mean, I think that Malachi did a really good job because he had already created like an outline. And so we had a lot of material to give to our writers. And then so they were able to create kind of a couple first drafts for us based off of all that information. And then now we want to really just kind of make it as undeniable as possible. So we've sought out a story editor who we're going to bring on to help us really just kind of hone the story even further. So all of that is to say, we felt like we needed to hire someone, and it was not going to be us.
It also really helped too, because the way we structured our pitch, even before we had written the pilot as well too, we structured the pitch in the way that we saw that pilot episode going. Pilot episodes are great because they are introductions to your characters in a sense as well too. So structuring your pitch sometimes around that really helps in a way. For this specific instance, it doesn't always work for everyone. But that really helped us to need to realize how, once we started pitching it even more, even after writing the pilot, it made me realize, oh shoot, there's more changes that we need to do to this pilot story. And like, based on the feedback we were getting and tips from our mentor, it was like the pilot that we had written is so different now than the actual pitch that we're doing, that we got to go back and like get more feedback, get more insight, do a rewrite of it. And that's why we brought in this story editor on board to really get that more, get the feedback that we've been hearing with our pitch, and implement that into this pilot now.
Okay, so that gives me another question here. So for those watching, what about like how do you get used to getting feedback? Like, you know, we talked about this before the session started, but like it's daunting for a lot of people, and it can be hurtful sometimes as well, right? It can be emotionally kind of destabilizing when someone comes and says, "Oh, you thought that was good. Well, actually, I'm going to pull it apart and tell you what things are wrong with it." Like you seem so comfortable, Malachi, with making the most of feedback and continually improving your project. Can you talk to us about how you got comfortable with that, or how people might go about it?
I mean, it's definitely tough. I think when I first started like pitching this story around, and the feedback that I was getting, when it wasn't the feedback I wanted to hear, it was so tough to hear it. You have to kind of very much separate yourself necessarily from the idea. Like, what I do is after I pitch it, I'd be like, okay, forget about the story now and just hear what this person has to say and treat everything they say as it's gold, even if you don't completely agree with it at all. Because no one wants to say something, no one's providing bad notes. They may not think that it's necessarily a bad note. No one wants to give you being like, this sucks. Like, no one wants to tell you that. So the things that they're saying, they think will be helping you. So you have to find sometimes that note within the note. Working with Mansa really helped, because I like I mentioned before, I have a lot of hard time sometimes communicating my ideas. So Mansa will be able to translate those ideas and what they need to say. But Mansa does that a lot of times with notes that will come back. Someone will come back saying like, oh, we didn't understand this part of like the story or this part of the pitch, or can you guys expand upon this area? And I'm like, I swear I just told you about that. They'll be like, what was this character's name? And I'm like, I said that 5 minutes ago. And it's just like, no, they mean that like this character isn't as popping out to the other ones as what that means.
Right.
Right.
A
way to expand that character now more, because if they can't remember that character's name, then they can't remember that character. So let's find a way to get that character to be as memorable as possible.
That's really powerful, like really interesting. So I'm just writing some notes down because I want to recap everything you've said at the very end. Because there's so many like, truth bombs that you're dropping right now that I think like a lot of people, like I wish someone had told me when I started in this industry some of this stuff, because it's like sometimes you feel like you're walking into a brick wall when you get some of those notes. You're like, wow, really? Ouch. So
I grew up with African parents, so I've been getting harsh feedback my whole life.
Well, there you go. So I think that's a good. We can thank our parents sometimes for some of the harsh advice they give us.
The last thing I'd say about notes as well too is sometimes just don't respond to a note. Like literally, someone will tell you a note, and all you have to do is like, "Thank you so much for that feedback. I'll think about it later," and actually think about it later. Don't immediately respond to it being like, "I think that's wrong," or "I don't agree with what you're saying," because sometimes there might be a little bit of truth to that what they're saying as well too. And in my experience, when you say that to someone you're pitching to as well too, they'll no longer want to buy the show because sometimes they're just saying a note just to test how you're actually going to react to notes in future.
Yeah,
it's
true. It's true. Yeah, because like another thing we pointed out earlier is that these things take a long time, right? So like when someone's trying to figure out, okay, can this person collaborate and can they take critical feedback and now they're going to collaborate with me, or is this going to be like pulling teeth for the next 3 years or however long it takes? That's good advice. And as I said, like I think I've said it maybe 100 times since we started talking. You're both so smart. It's really like very impressive to have so many valuable pieces of information coming from two people like this. So what about stage fright? That's the other thing I want to talk about. So we talked about nerves, but like obviously preparation. I think you really touched on there. Preparation is so important. Because when you hit a wall and you're like freaking out, it's like okay, I can rely on my prep, right? But are there any other tips for like dealing with stage fright or nerves or getting up in front of a live audience?
Lots of water.
Yeah,
lots of water. Hydrate.
Please hydrate.
I like to take St. John's wort, which is a vitamin that helps calm your nerves.
Right? Yeah, good advice.
Yeah, you should have seen Mansa during Ottawa. Literally a tube of it just everywhere. Like
I got a massive bottle of St. John's wort in my bag. But yeah, no, just breathing deeply and trying to find a comforting face. And I think it was really great because we had made some good friends and connections at the festival throughout that week. So when I was feeling nervous in our talk, I would just find those faces. I'm like, these are safe faces. I'm going to look at you and no one else.
Friend, not sure, friend. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good coping mechanism. And then you talked about keywords. So I think like, is that a coping tool as well? If you fumble and you lose your way and you feel like you're choking, are there like milestones or like guide rails that you can set up for yourself to sort of keep moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, what was really great about the way me and Mansa pitch is we both specifically talk about the projects of the story that we love the most as well too, and we know from the back of our hands. Like me, I really love some specific characters. Mansa really relates to certain character. So whenever we talk about this pitch, I always go, "Okay, Mansa, you're going to talk about Jasmine. I'm going to talk about Aaron and Drew." Like we swap it. We don't normally swap it up. We usually let the person that knows what they're talking about talk about it as much as possible, because that's the only way you're going to really be comfortable is if you know the material and then we could really become ingrained in kind of like that story as well. So that goes back to that keywords as well. Like I knew when I was talking about a certain character that I had to talk about their nerdy traits, being queer, and their boyfriend issues, because that's just kind of, and I just knew that there was that kind of like through line. And so just by connecting those three things, I could go through like a 4 or 5 sentence kind of paragraph speech about that whole journey that character goes through, because I knew those key points and I knew to touch on those 3 key points. And at the end of like, before I finished talking, I just thought to myself, okay, did I say all those 3 things? And if I thought about that one last thing and realized, oh shoot, I missed it. I don't panic about that. I just realize, I say being like, I forgot to mention about this. Because everyone knows that you're nervous as well too. So just accept the nerves as well. Everyone's gonna mess up. So if you stumble or you like you slip up or you say the wrong thing, just be like, oh wait, actually I meant to say this, and it's fine.
That's so cool. It's so true, and I think that idea of like giving yourself those key points as well means that even if some of the details change from pitch to pitch, the core elements remain, right? And then you're controlling what the most important things are getting through.
Exactly, yeah. And that just came down to, as I said, preparation and practicing with each other a lot. So, having gone through that process of going back and forth all the time, he knew that when I said this, one sentence, that was the end of the section. I would always say that towards the end. So it would be okay. Now the beginning of his intro to a particular character or world or what we were wanting to talk about next. So practicing together and knowing what those milestones were for each other's sections was helpful.
I also recorded my parts of the pitch and I listened to it on the train ride to Ottawa as well, just to practice getting used to even hearing my own voice as well too, saying
again
things.
it's super smart. It's super smart because like I think like a lot of people don't have the benefit of having a Mansa with them, right? So like if you're on your own and you're having to practice, I think recording yourself, like it's so, I mean it feels super embarrassing when you do it the first time, and it's like I mean the first time I tried to like speak in a camera and do that stuff, I was like, oh my god, this is so awful. I can't stand my accent, I can't stand my voice. And then once you get past that, it's like, oh, maybe I could make this clearer, and maybe I could say that clearer, and maybe I can enunciate this word better. And so, yeah, that's such good advice. Really precious. So I think we've pretty much covered everything about last year's Pitch This. So now I want to give Sarah an opportunity to talk a bit about 2023 and some of the exciting things that are coming up.
Yeah, we're so excited to be hosting Pitch This again with a whole new cohort of folks who are going to be semifinalists, and someone's going to be a winner. So it's exciting. Yeah. So we're going to be opening applications. The criteria and everything hasn't been announced yet. We'll be announcing that at the end of April, and applications will be opening early May. And so we'll be accepting those until mid-June. And then we will be contacting the semifinalists for their mentorship hookups in early July.
Time flies so fast.
Exactly. And everyone has all this amazing information of how to prepare themselves for what comes up. So I think that's really going to help everyone who's coming next in this process. It's very generous of you to have done that, it's taking time to do that. I just want to talk a little bit about a couple of things that I noted down while you were talking. I think so. It's like be prepared and lean into the process. Like be yourself, stay open to the note within the note, and accept the nerves. Like that for me, they're the big things that really came through. And obviously practice.
Practice is key. Story is
exactly
key. Practice is key. It all comes back to it.
Yes, having gone through this process a couple of times with a couple of different cohorts, that is, those are notes that come up constantly between the mentors and the judges and everyone. So practice.
Yeah, really, it can't be. And I think that a lot of creatives, especially, I think they forget that pitching is a whole thing. Like a lot of folks that are maybe really talented at writing or really talented at draftsmanship or draftspersonship, they forget that just because that's your like main skill and you're really good at it, that's not enough. And you have to prepare for the pitch. It's a work unto itself. And it really requires practice. Like people that are pitching, I don't know anyone that does it without practicing. Like I think there's always this sort of myth of the sort of pitching natural, that person that just walks up and I'll pitch you a show and look at this and it's gonna be great. And it's like no, there was a lot of practice that went into that.
Yeah, that idea of the elevator pitch where someone just like tells you a story in the elevator and just like, oh, this is totally random. No, it's not. They've been practicing that for years. They know exactly what they're saying. They know how to time it. They know that when that number hits like 2 or the third floor or something, that they're going to switch into that portion of the next pitch. Like they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen a lot of different techniques. One of the best ones I saw was for virtual pitches was like a script with the font changing for how loud or quietly things had to be said, and it was just like all the pitch was like laid out vertically. It was like the weirdest looking script I've ever seen, but it was like the words were big depending on how important they were and how loud they had to be said. And but it was just like it just rolled down vertically in front of the camera, and I thought that was such a clever thing to do because then they were really able to control their pitch and like rehearse. It was super smart. But I think there's a lot of techniques now using the virtual like setups as well to make it feel really natural.
Yeah, a teleprompter one is a great one.
Yeah, exactly. And just like learning to speak to the camera as well. I think that's the other thing. It's like if you're pitching like this and talking to everybody, it's super weird. Right.
Yeah,
I'm reading off another screen, but it's okay. Nothing weird about this.
I almost started this call with like the screen over here, and I realized, wait, there's no camera there. That would have been very weird to do this whole thing just staring at my other monitor.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. It is a bit odd, and I think that the other thing as well. And thanks so much for bringing this up about the standing up on stage and speaking in front of an audience. I think that's another thing that you just got to practice. You got to practice. One thing I tell a lot of people here at the studio as well is start with Instagram. Use stories. They disappear like that. Like you get yourself in front of a camera, you say a thing, and it's gone. So it's like it's a good way to practice as well as speaking in front of people.
Just pretend you're on stage doing a TikTok.
I'm on stage doing a TikTok. It's gonna be fine. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's definitely there's lots of ways to practice, and I think there's about getting creative about doing that as well, for sure. One thing I didn't ask as well is like actually like building the presentation itself, like the pitch, like the visual aids for the pitch. Did you divide those tasks up, or did how did you go about creating that? Did one of you make the skeleton or the body of it, and then you essentially decorated it afterwards, or did you create the artwork first, or how did you go about doing that?
So we hired a illustrator to create our characters for us, and we kind of figured out what the key scenes and a key similar to like our pitch. There were, as we were talking about different milestones about the world, we wanted to have an image that showed what the world looked like. We needed images that showed what the individual characters looked like. And then we just had some other images that we felt like were really powerful that we originally pulled from our pilot script that would just really showcase what the show was. And then we had a graphic designer who helped us put it all together into the package that you saw. And they took those images and kind of laid it all out for us. And then we would kind of give our feedback. Hey, we need to move this around. We want to see this here, see that there. And then we worked with them like that.
Yeah, it was really great because it allowed us to kind of focus on the presentation. And for me, it was literally just being like, we'd go on a call with our artist, Jonathan, and I'd just be to him like, I really want to capture this scene and do this like in this way to feature this character doing this. I just get to be creative and being like, I think this is going to be something cool to really see. And then he would just draw it up and I'd see it and I'd be like, this is phenomenal. And then we'd show it to other people and they'd be like, this is phenomenal. I'm just like, yeah, I know. In my mind, it looked phenomenal, but Jonathan made it look phenomenal actually in real life.
Yes. Yeah. No, honestly, he doesn't get enough credit because we came to him sometimes with like insane deadlines. I'm like, and can you do all of these in 2 weeks?
Oh my goodness.
Please help.
Yeah. So yeah, all credit to Jonathan Fado, who did all of our illustrations.
That's a phenomenal artist. Yeah. So I'd be like, and that's the thing, like building a team surrounding for you, because pitching it's better with more individuals, to be completely honest. So as one person, it's very hard. That's why you have to practice even more if you're a single individual, because timing is everything.
It's so true. And so everything rests on your shoulders as well. So if you're having an off day, it can start to feel like a lot of pressure, right? All of a sudden. And I think having friends of your pitch as well, like people you can rely on to go back to and pitch to, and just and people you trust, people that you know are going to give you valuable feedback as well, not just kind of like an endless run of random people. I think that's really good to have people that you can trust. So I think there's one other. I just see this. I'm having a look at the chat. There's one other question about like when the applications will be opening up. So maybe we can like and where to find the application.
Yes, I realized I forgot to mention that. So thank you. So if you go on to animationfestival.ca, that is the OIAF's website, and you can sign up for our newsletter updates or follow on social media, and we'll be announcing Pitch This applications opening all across all channels. So stay tuned for that. And again, May 1st is when they open.
Yeah, May 1st. My mother's birthday, just in case you're wondering.
Oh.
And so, yeah, so I think that's it from us. And I just want to take a minute to say a big shout out to all the mentors that were participated last year. It's, everyone, as you say, they're all industry professionals. Everyone has like full-time jobs, they're all very busy, but I think it's really great that people take the time to give back to artists and to creators that are coming up in the industry and looking for opportunities. So big shout out to all the mentors, and really excited to announce this year's mentors, because I think it makes a big difference when you have really quality mentors, I think, helping people through the process.
Definitely.
And big thank you to Malachi and Mansa for taking the time to talk to everybody today and being so honest and open, like sharing such amazing advice and really like authentic experience. Like thank you so much for being so open about that.
Absolutely.
Happy to help.
Yeah, we're pretty open books. We're not very secretive individuals, depending on what you ask us.
So if actually before we sign off, just one last thing for you two as well. Is there if people want to follow your journey, is there anywhere they can find you on social media, like Instagram or anywhere like that, where they can follow along with what's happening with your project?
Yeah, for me, I'm at Produced by Mal on Instagram. Produced BY and then MAL for short. And then you can also go to my website, malachiellis.com, just my full name. You can find all my projects, updates on there as well too. And yeah.
Yep. And for me, I mostly post of my, I guess, professional work on LinkedIn. So just Mansa Chintoh on LinkedIn. Find me, follow me. But then I also have my production company website, Long Walk Productions, where you'll be posting, where I have information about my projects and various updates as well.
Yay! Well, I can't wait to see what comes next, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about Project Blackout.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming soon, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Coming soon. You got to fight the good fight. That's why. What a apt name, project. Your company, Long Walk Productions. I think it's really quite poetic.
That's true.
It is a long walk, and I love a long walk personally.
Well, you know what? I think it's underestimated, a long walk. All these joggers around and people talking about, like a high intensity training, but I think you can't underestimate a long walk.
No, exactly.
I never even connected that until you just said that as well too. I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. Like long walk now. It's just like, oh wow, it all adds up.
Exactly. And
It
Sarah,
was meant to be.
exactly. And Sarah, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
I think just stay tuned for updates from us. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Thank you, Heath, for hosting, Malachi and Mansa for being a part of this chat. It's been lovely. This is like a very small part of my job compared to everything else, and it's my favorite part every year. It's awesome.
Yes.
Likewise, the same goes for me. I love it. I can't wait for this year. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, best of luck, everyone who applies.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.